Welcome to Moments with Marianne. I'm so delighted we're spending this time here today. We have a very inspiring show coming right up with special guest, Dr. Paria Hassouri. And she's here today to share with us her new book, Found in Transition, A Mother's Evolution During Her Child's Gender Change. Now, Paria is a mother of three and a pediatrician practicing in Los Angeles. She's also a marathoner, transgender rights activist, storyteller, and avid reader. She is a proud Iranian-American and spent most of her formative years in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Her personal essays have been published in the Washington Post, the Los Angeles Times, the Huffington Post, Women's Running Magazine, Kevin, MD, and Grown and Flown. So let's welcome to the show, Dr. Paria Hassouri.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm happy to be here.
You know, what an honor it is to have you here and to talk about this book. I'm sure there are so many people out there going, gosh, I wish I had this book 10, 20, 30 years ago, you know, when just as life has been changing, transitions have been happening. I think that you know, people are waiting for this type of book.
Yeah, I mean, even just 3 years ago when I myself needed this book, I couldn't find exactly this book. I could find some other things, but not really this book, which is why I decided to go ahead and share our story and write it. And every day we hear about more teens and young adults coming out as trans, and we hear about more and more families who are grappling with the same scenario. And so I'm happy to be able to add to the narrative and stories out there. And hopefully that will help people who need to read it, hear it.
Well, so why don't you share with us a little bit about the title? You know, what drew you to title your book Found in Transition?
Well, so it's Found in Transition, A Mother's Evolution During Her Daughter's Gender Change. And it's really more my story and what I went through and how I evolved from the time my daughter first came out to us to when she kind of proceeded through social and some medical transition and then legal name and gender change. And it's really about how I evolved during this process, and I found myself during this time as well. I had my own issues that I was dealing with, some issues of, you know, underlying insecurity and need to prove my self-worth for many years. And sort of as I went through this process of transition with her and saw how strong and incredibly brave she was, I had to also face my own insecurities from the past and find myself in the process. So that was sort of part of why I chose Found in Transition. And it was also a little bit of a play on Lost in Translation. And so it kind of just spoke to me. Another title I had considered was Family in Transition, because this was really a process for our entire family. But at the end, it's mainly my story and my daughter's story. So Found in Transition seemed more appropriate.
Well, you're such a beautiful writer. I mean, I love how you just poured your story out into this book. What made you decide that now is the time to share this story? Because it could be very personal.
Yeah, I think so my daughters came out to us as transgender when she was 13 and a half. And when she came out to us, we were completely blindsided. We didn't think that there were any signs in her childhood that she might be trans. And so when she first came out to us, we didn't believe her. And we sort of had this time of denial and delay in her care because we thought that she was doing it just to get attention. And the main reason for that was that most of the stories about trans people in the media, still now, and when she came out a few years ago, were about people who present in childhood, or people who, even if they don't come out until later, say that they always knew, but they hid it. But in my daughter's case, she didn't present in childhood, and she maintains that she herself really never thought that she might be trans until around age 12 to 13 is when she started to think about it. And so when she came out, and I hadn't heard stories about her, about people who present like her, I thought that she had to be wrong, and she had to be just a confused teenager, and this couldn't be right. And I went looking for stories like hers, and I really didn't find them. I found books written by trans people who had always known they were trans from early childhood, from 3-4 years old. I found books written by parents of kids who presented very early, but I didn't find a story of a child written, by a parent of a child who came out later. And so then I felt it was important to tell our story, because I thought that if I had heard a story like ours, I would have been more likely to be open and listen to her and believe her, rather than be in denial and not accept it, and that therefore cause a 6 to 9 month delay in her process of medical transition. And when we're talking about sort of peak puberty time, I mean, a 6 to 9 month delay doesn't sound like a lot, maybe to an outsider, but for a child who's in the peak of going through puberty and is born, with male genitalia and is having testosterone, raging through during puberty, that's a 6 to 9 month period where a lot of masculinization of the body happens, that then had to be, reversed and undone, and some of it can't be undone. So, it wasn't so much like, oh, okay, well, we were 6 to 9 months late, but then we accepted her and everything was fine. It's that a lot of masculinization of her body happened during that time that didn't need to happen. And if it hadn't happened, it would have made her subsequent life easier, for sure.
Do you feel a lot of families kind of go through that, period of time where they're trying to decide whether or not this is something that's really happening, or trying to understand it so that way that they can move forward? And do you feel like your story will help people who are in that space?
Absolutely. I think there are so many parents. So now I'm in a support group with, I think there's like 1,000, trans families in the support group that I'm in. And, every month new families come, and there are so many, I thought that our story was a little unusual or unique, and it's not unusual or unique at all. And every month I'm meeting new families whose children come out, either in their teens or young adulthood, and the parents had no idea, and they're completely bewildered and in shock. And because it seems like it came out of the blue, they don't know what to do. And they similarly feel like they haven't heard stories like this. And, it's so hard to make decisions when you're not sure if what your child is telling you is true or not true, or a phase. And so I think the more you hear stories that this is a way that being trans can present, then you've already been exposed to that, and that. And so if it were to happen for your child or your niece or nephew or, a child's friend, you've heard it, it's familiar. And so you can accept it sooner. So I definitely think it can help, and it's really needed.
Well, I would assume that it takes a lot of courage to come out and probably thinking about the right time and the right place and when to address this with the family. So, of course, you would think that, gosh, there may not really, if a child is discovering that as they develop and become a little older, that it may not be something that actually comes out immediately where family know.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Well, how would you say that this experience has changed you personally? I know we went over some things, but also your family.
I think that, when she came out, I thought that this was the worst or one of the worst things that could possibly happen to me. And it has actually been the single thing that it's been the most eye-opening experience of my life. It's been very enriching. It has brought people into my life that I would not have otherwise met. It has made me develop an interest in trans care and learning about, I'm also a pediatrician, learning about trans care and potentially doing trans care myself someday. It has really shifted me into more being more of an activist. So I think those are all ways that I've changed. And also it's really made me realize what's important in life, what I should prioritize. Her bravery has made me realize how much fear I had in my life, and how, fear had held me back from so much in my life. And so it's really just completely changed how I think about things and approach things, and enriched my life in ways I would have never expected. And this was something that, when she first came out, I thought, I'm never going to get through this. I'm never going to recover from this. I'm never going to stop crying. And now I realize what an enriching experience it has been for all of us to witness the change in her, and just to see how much your heart can expand, how much your mind can expand once you are open and receptive and approaching it with love instead of with fear.
Do you feel that most families go through this type of range of emotion, finding out, and then, I wouldn't say dealing with it, but you're really kind of coming up with solutions as a family?
Yeah, I think it depends on when the person presents. So for kids who present starting when they're 3 and 4 years old, saying that they, if it's somebody who's born designated male at birth, and saying that they want to wear dresses or play with dolls, or it's just flat out saying I'm a girl. I think for the parents who are seeing it in their kids from when they're 3, 4 years old, and they've sort of always known, it's a different process than for parents whose kids are older, like puberty and beyond, where they didn't know and there weren't signs and they're sort of just thrown into it. Because I think when a child presents younger, you've sort of seen it all along, and then it slowly progresses, and you don't really need to, you're not making medical decisions until a child hits puberty at the earliest. Before that, you're really just making more social decisions and letting the child just explore who they are. And so you're not hit with it all at once in the same way. But I think for parents whose kids don't have signs when they're younger, and they're coming out later, at a point where you're suddenly thinking about everything, social, medical, legal, issues, it's a lot all at once. And I think they do go through these stages of, you know, denial and anger and grief and acceptance and and moving forward and going back and forth through these phases simultaneously, and also periodically, even when you get to the part of acceptance and moving on, the grief sometimes periodically comes back in little waves as well, because you've had this image of what you thought your child was going to be, and now that's not the case. And as much as you accept it and you move on from it, sometimes you can't help but recall some of sort of what you had hoped for your child, and still periodically allow yourself the space to grieve that, while still moving on and supporting your child.
Oh my goodness. I think that is a perfect way to just view everything, because I mean, as people are honestly going through their emotions, unpacking maybe the hopes and dreams that they have for their child, not really realizing that, they have a whole new set of hope and dreams that could be there.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah, there is a whole, and the other thing is, I think that I think when your child comes out as trans, you assume that, oh, their life is definitely, it's going to be, or at least let me say, I assumed that her life is going to be worse. It's going to be harder. She's not going to get as good of a job. We're doomed. I mean, I had all this doom and gloom mentality when she came out. And, they are going to have a different life than what you thought. But it's not necessarily, there's going to be challenges, but it's not necessarily worse challenges than somebody else might have had. And I've had to really learn to be optimistic about her future rather than be pessimistic about her future. And part of what gives me the optimism is that, once this all happened and we became involved with the trans community, we met the most incredible people. And so at the minimum, our lives are going to have this incredible community of activist families in them. And for her, she's made some friends in the community, and who are just, incredibly strong, brave people. And so her life is going to be wonderful and great. It's not it doesn't necessarily have to be harder or worse. Her life could actually be better because of this, because she could potentially be surrounded with a whole group of people she wouldn't have otherwise known. She could potentially be, a trailblazer and make a big difference. Or she could choose not to be. She could just, live her, life, quietly and succeed in, whatever ways, she wants. But I think I had this assumption that, oh, she's going to have this hard, bad, life. And that's not the case at all. And so I absolutely, right now, I have no question that she has a very bright, successful future in front of her. And I think really when we support trans kids and young adults, there are no limits to what they can do. If we as a community all embrace them, just like we would embrace any other child or young adult.
Do you feel that maybe this negativity that like that you went through and maybe other families go through is just their own fears that are kind of piling up, and they're not quite sure what their child's future is going to look like because now it's so different?
Yeah, I think it is. For me, I mean, part of my fear was, I grew up as a Iranian-American immigrant, so sort of I was like a brown-skinned person in a predominantly white neighborhood, and I had some bullying, and I, often felt like an outsider. And so, when you grow up as an outsider yourself, sort of the last thing you want is to think that, oh, now your child is going to be the ultimate outsider. So for me, a lot of the fear was because of my own personal experience. For many other parents, a lot of their fear about their kids is because, the media for years has not presented trans people in a positive light. They've really highlighted a lot of negative things about being trans, rather than highlighting all the positive things that trans people are doing, and all the successful trans people, who are out there. I think that is shifting just a little bit finally in the last year or two. But if you have your whole life, your only idea of trans people has been negative images that you've been bombarded with in the media, then you can't help but, when your child comes out, be afraid for them. I think there's a statistics that only 80% of Americans have never met a trans person that they know of, or don't have a trans person that they're close to. So only 20% of Americans have met a trans person, or have some sort of relationship with one. So the unknown is always, so if it's unknown, and the only thing is negative, through negative media, then you can't help but have fear, and then dump that fear on your child and say, no, this is the last thing I want for my child. So it's really up to, we really need to change the narrative out there, so that people know this is just another, this is how some people are, and that it's not a bad thing. And hopefully, sort of open everybody's mind. And so, if more people know of trans people and trans stories that are positive, then, if their child comes out, it's not automatically going to be, oh, this is going to be terrible for my kid.
Yeah, I felt your book, Found in Transition, really helped to shine the light on the positive and possibilities that, are with the trans community, and people who are coming out and sharing that they're trans. When you look through everything that you've been through, what would you say were some of the greatest lessons you learned from this process?
I think the greatest lessons I've learned are, one is that the being an optimist for your child. Don't be a pessimist. That's definitely one of them. The other one is that not every trans person presents in the same way, at the same age. Not every trans person wants to necessarily medically transition. There isn't one single formula for how trans people present, and how they choose to transition or not. And I think just also to make sure that you are parenting with love, rather than through a cloud of fear. I think that's really been the most important for me, is to put fear aside, and put what the outside world, is telling me aside, and look at my child and say, what's my child saying that she needs from me today? How can I parent her with love and make decisions based on love instead of fear?
I love that. I think if any parent took that advice, they would have happy, healthy children, regardless if they're trans, not trans, whatever, they'd be happy.
Right. Absolutely.
Was it difficult to have this discussion with your extended family?
Surprisingly, I was so worried about having it with my parents. And surprisingly, the discussion with and mainly with my mom, and surprisingly, my discussion with her went really well. I think she was the person I was most afraid of telling. And I told her over the phone, and as soon as I told her, she said, okay, we're going to figure this out. Don't worry. Don't stress. It's going to be okay. And I actually repeated it. So, cause I was like, maybe she didn't understand what I said. So I said, Mom, yeah, she's, and at that time I was still using male pronouns for her. So I was like, Mom, he says that he thinks he's a girl. This isn't about being gay or straight. He says he thinks he's a girl. He wants to wear makeup to school. He wants to wear dresses. This isn't about sexuality. I wanted to make sure she understood. Mm-hmm. And she said, yeah, okay. All right. It's okay. It's going to be okay. Like she didn't know, but she just kept saying it's going to be okay. And I don't want you to be stressed. We're going to figure this out. And she didn't say, no, that's impossible. I'm sure that she also was thinking that this is probably just a phase and she's just confused and she doesn't know what she wants. But her immediate answer to me wasn't, this is impossible, this is just confusion, this will pass. Her immediate answer was like, okay, we're going to figure this out. Don't worry about it. And once I told her and her reaction was accepting, I really didn't care about anybody else in the world and what they thought. It was like, and that's part of what makes me sad, is that, when I told my mom and my mom said it's okay, it was such a sense of relief for me. Yet when my own daughter came and told me, I immediately told her no. And I wasn't able to, she told me her biggest secret that she had to tell me. And my immediate reaction was, no, you don't know what you're talking about. And I didn't give her what, my mother gave me. That's really one of my biggest regrets. But yeah, once I told my mom and she was okay, I really didn't care about how anybody else would react. I was fortunate. My sisters were very accepting. I don't think none of us saw this coming. So it wasn't like I was the only one who was clueless and there were signs. None of my friends who had seen her through her whole life had seen it coming. My sisters are both very involved with her. They hadn't seen it coming. My husband's siblings, very involved with her. But nobody said, oh, this is like a terrible thing. I think everybody thought, okay, this must be a phase. This can't be right, but we're here for you and we'll figure this out. And then as time went on and it was clear that this isn't a phase and you can't really ignore it anymore, everybody, accepted and embraced her. So we were very fortunate in that way, because that is not, unfortunately, that is not the experience for a lot of other families.
Yeah, it sounds like, your mom is all about love is love, and you've got to love that. Yeah. But, how does your daughter feel about that initial conversation she had with you today? She look back at it and you guys laugh. How does she feel about it?
Yeah, we definitely don't laugh. So I think she understands sort of where it came from. I think we've moved so far from it, and we have such a great relationship right now, and we're so close that she forgives it. I think I need to forgive myself for it. I still haven't fully forgiven myself for it, but I think she has long forgiven me for it. So yeah. So I guess she's pretty incredible in that way. So.
Well, I'm sure she's very proud of you as well, because not only have you worked through this as a family and, really come to understand what this is all about and help other families and other people shine the light on what transgender life is like and what to expect and some of the ups and downs, but you've really become such an advocate for it. She's got to be so proud of you.
Yeah, I think she is really proud of the advocacy. She's herself is very outspoken as well, and she's definitely proud of the advocacy. I mean, obviously, I had to get her okay to write the book, and she was okay with me writing the book. I had to, I sort of went through what was going to be included and what wasn't going to be included, and what pictures were going to be included. And she is proud of me. She definitely wants to do her part to make things easier for, the next child who comes out, as well. And so, yeah, and I'm pretty proud of her because she does a lot of her own activism as well, particularly in her school. She was the first person who openly trans student at her high school, and the high school has had to make multiple changes for her to accommodate for her, which will obviously make it easier for the next trans child who comes out in her high school. So.
Oh, good for her. My goodness. What a courageous young lady. My goodness. Well, and, I look at your book in its totality and I think, gosh, how many people you're going to be helping with this book. And not only that, it's really shining a light on something everyone needs to know. I feel like everyone needs to read Found in Transition. I love how this also may impact your practice as a physician, because think of all the young people that will, be in your office someday. And if this, difficult discussion comes up, you're prepared. You're ready to be there, be present, and offer the best advice.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that has changed a lot, already, I have, I'm in a group with 8 other pediatricians, and when one of their patients, says something to them, they become sort of the immediate go-to person in terms of like referral lists for, therapists and support groups and, just how to address things. And, it really should become mandatory. So there should be some sort of mandatory training for all pediatricians, I think, and primary care givers at this point, because we are going to see more kids and young adults come out. Yeah, it's definitely already affecting my practice, will continue to do so more. And I hope that other primary care physicians, if they haven't already started to learn more about this, that they do. I hope that it becomes mandatory training in pediatric residency and in medical school. It is not yet. So hopefully all that will change in the future.
Well, they need to hand out your book to each med student. As class starts, they get a new book, and yours is it. Well, Paria, where can our listeners connect with you and learn about your work and be part of your community?
So I have a website, pariahassouri.com. There's a contact me link on there. They can also subscribe to my newsletter. And if I, publish something or do a podcast or anything like that, I put, an interview, I put it on there. I'm also fairly active on Instagram at LA Paria. But there's also a link to my Instagram and Twitter on my website, Paria Hassouri.
Well, Paria, thank you so much for taking the time to be on the show with us here today.
Thank you for having me. I really enjoyed this conversation, and I really appreciate you sharing my book with your audience. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you, Paria. It has been such an honor to spend this time with you and to talk about your new book, Found in Transition. Found in Transition is available at Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and all indie retailers. And if you don't see it on the shelf, ask for them to order it. And of course, it's available on Kindle. Well, we're at the end of our time today. I would like to thank everyone for tuning in. You're listening to Moments with Marianne. And remember, make every moment count.
In a single moment, your life can change. Moments with Marianne is a transformative hour that covers an endless array of topics with the best of the best. Her guests are leaders in their fields, ranging from inspirational authors, top industry leaders, and business and spiritual entrepreneurs. Each guest is gifted and a true visionary, a recognized leader in her own work, and while teaching others to develop, refocus, and grow, Marianne will bring the best guest and sometimes a special surprise. Don't miss this. You never know just which moment will change your life forever. Moments with Marianne airs every Sunday, Monday, Thursday, and Friday at 8 p.m. Eastern and 5 p.m. Pacific Time. Make sure to tune in and visit momentswithmarianne.com for more information.